The fangs sank into her flesh before Hannah Morrison even heard the rattle, and in that single moment, everything about her life changed forever. She had been walking through the scrub brush 12 miles east of El Dorado, Kansas, searching for wildflowers to press into her journal, when the pain exploded through her ankle like lightning. Hannah looked down and saw the diamond-patterned serpent recoiling into the grass, its tail still buzzing its deadly warning. The year was 1879, and she knew exactly what a rattlesnake bite meant this far from town. Her breath caught in her throat as she stumbled backward, her basket of flowers scattering across the ground. The pain was immediate and fierce, radiating up her leg in waves that made her vision blur. Hannah pressed her hand against a cottonwood tree to steady herself, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. She was alone, completely alone, and the nearest help was 12 miles away through rough terrain under the burning Kansas sun. She tried to take a step and nearly collapsed. Already her ankle was swelling, the flesh around the bite marks turning an angry red. Hannah had seen what happened to people who got bit by rattlers. Some survived, many did not. The thought of dying alone out here, of her father finding her body days later, made her throat tighten with fear. "Help," she called out, though she knew it was useless. No one came out this far. She had told her father she would be gone for a few hours, exploring the creek bed. He would not start worrying until evening at the earliest. Hannah sank down against the tree trunk, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She needed to stay calm. Panic would only make the venom spread faster. She fumbled with her skirt, trying to see the wound better. 2 puncture marks, oozing blood. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely untie her boot laces. That was when she heard the sound of hooves. For a moment, Hannah thought she was hallucinating, that the venom was already affecting her mind. But no, the sound grew louder, and then she saw him. A lone rider on a black horse, moving at an easy lope across the grassland. She tried to stand to wave, but her leg gave out and she fell hard. "Help!" she screamed, putting every ounce of strength she had into the word. "Please help!" The rider's head snapped toward her. He immediately urged his horse into a gallop, closing the distance between them in seconds. As he approached, Hannah could see he was young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair under a dusty brown hat and eyes that were startlingly blue even from a distance. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, dropping to his knees beside her. "What happened?" His voice was rough but steady, his hands already reaching for her leg. "Rattler," Hannah gasped. "Just now, maybe 5 minutes ago." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He did not waste time with reassurances or questions. His hands moved to her ankle, gently but firmly pulling her boot off. Hannah hissed with pain as the leather dragged across her swollen flesh. "My name is Lucas Wright," he said as he worked, his voice deliberately calm. "I work for the Henderson Ranch about 15 miles north. You are going to be all right, but I need to act fast. Do you understand?" Hannah nodded, though she was not sure she believed him. She had heard too many stories about rattlesnake bites, about people who had died in agony hours after being bitten. Lucas was already pulling a knife from his belt, a wicked-looking blade that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Hannah's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "The venom needs to come out," Lucas said, meeting her gaze with those intense blue eyes. "This is going to hurt like hell, but it is the only chance you have got. Can you be strong for me?" Hannah felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she nodded. Lucas took off his bandana and handed it to her. "Bite down on this," he said. She barely had time to put the cloth between her teeth before he made the first cut. The pain was unbelievable, worse than the initial bite. Hannah screamed against the bandana, her hands clawing at the dirt. Lucas worked quickly, his face set in hard lines of concentration. He cut across the bite marks, not deep but enough to make the blood flow freely. Then, before Hannah fully understood what he was doing, he put his mouth to the wound and began to suck. She watched in a daze as he drew the poisoned blood into his mouth and spat it onto the ground, over and over. His lips and chin were stained red, but he did not stop until he was satisfied that he had drawn out as much venom as possible. Finally, he sat back, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "We need to get you to a doctor," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. "The nearest one is in El Dorado. That is your town, right? I saw your basket. Those look like the wildflowers from the Morrison property. You know my family." Hannah asked weakly. "Everyone knows the Morrisons," Lucas said. He was already tearing strips from his shirt, wrapping them tightly around her ankle to slow the spread of any remaining venom. "Your father runs the general store. You are Hannah, the one who reads all the time." Despite everything, Hannah felt a flush of embarrassment. "You have seen me." Hard not to notice a pretty girl sitting on the store porch with her nose in a book every time I come to town for supplies, Lucas said. He finished tying off the makeshift bandage and stood, scooping her up in his arms before she could protest. "We need to ride, now. But I am too heavy. You cannot carry me all the way to El Dorado." Lucas looked down at her, and for the first time, there was a hint of something like amusement in his eyes. "Madam, I have hauled full-grown calves through mud and up hills. You weigh about as much as a sack of grain. Now hold on tight because we are going to ride hard." He lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her. Hannah found herself pressed against his chest, his arms coming around her to grip the reins. She could feel his heart beating steady and strong against her back. "What is your name?" Lucas asked as he turned the horse toward El Dorado. "Hannah," she whispered. "Hannah Morrison." "Well, Hannah Morrison, you are going to have one hell of a story to tell." Then he kicked the horse into a gallop and they were flying across the Kansas prairie. The ride was a blur of pain and motion. Hannah drifted in and out of consciousness, the venom making her feel alternately hot and cold. Every time she started to slip sideways, Lucas's arm would tighten around her waist, holding her secure. "Stay with me," he kept saying. "Come on, Hannah. Stay awake. Talk to me." "About what?" she mumbled. "Anything. Tell me about those books you are always reading." It was hard to form thoughts, but Hannah tried. "I like stories about adventures, about people going places I will never see." "Where would you go if you could go anywhere?" "San Francisco," Hannah said dreamily. "I want to see the ocean." "Never been there myself," Lucas said. His voice seemed to come from very far away. "Been to Denver once. Mountains are something to see." "Tell me about the mountains," Hannah whispered, and he did. As they rode through the afternoon heat, with the sun beating down mercilessly and the horses' hooves pounding a desperate rhythm, Lucas described the Rocky Mountains. He told her about peaks that touched the clouds, about snow in July, about air so clear and cold it hurt to breathe. He talked about elk and eagles and the sound of wind through pine trees. He kept her anchored to consciousness with his words and his presence. The sun was lower in the sky when Hannah saw the first buildings of El Dorado rising from the prairie. She tried to sit up straighter, to tell Lucas she was fine, but her body would not cooperate. "Almost there," Lucas said. His voice was tight with strain. "Just hold on a little longer." People stopped and stared as Lucas galloped down Main Street with Hannah in his arms. He pulled up in front of Doc Henderson's office so abruptly that the horse reared slightly. "Doc," Lucas shouted, already dismounting with Hannah still in his arms. "Doc Henderson." The door flew open and a gray-haired man with spectacles emerged, his eyes widening when he saw Hannah's pale face and swollen leg. "Rattlesnake," Lucas said tersely. About 2 hours ago. I cut the wound and drew out what venom I could, but she needs help. Doc Henderson did not hesitate. Bring her inside. Quickly. The next few hours passed in a haze for Hannah. She was vaguely aware of being laid on a table, of Doc Henderson examining her ankle, of voices discussing treatment. Someone gave her something bitter to drink, and the world went soft and gray around the edges. When she woke, it was dark outside. A single lamp burned on a nearby table, casting warm light over the small room. Hannah realized she was lying on a cot, covered with a clean white sheet. Her leg throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, but the sharp agony was gone. "You are awake." Hannah turned her head and saw Lucas sitting in a chair beside the cot. He looked exhausted, his face drawn and pale in the lamplight. His shirt was still torn and blood-stained from making bandages. "You stayed," she said, her voice coming out as a croak. Lucas reached for a glass of water on the side table and helped her drink. "Wanted to make sure you pulled through. Doc Henderson says you saved my life. Says if you had not cut the wound and drawn out that venom, I would be dead right now." The doctor himself appeared in the doorway, his kind eyes studying Hannah with approval. "You are a very lucky young woman, Miss Morrison. That cowboy knows what he is doing." Hannah looked at Lucas, really looked at him for the first time. His face was lean and strong, with a day's worth of stubble darkening his jaw. There were lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that came from squinting against the sun. His hands, resting on his knees, were calloused and scarred from hard work. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way that made her heart do something strange in her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know how to repay you." Lucas shook his head. "No need for repayment. Anyone would have done the same." "But you were the one who was there," Hannah insisted. "You were the one who saved me." Before Lucas could respond, the door burst open and Hannah's father rushed in. Thomas Morrison was a stout man with thinning hair and a red face that spoke of high emotions. When he saw Hannah awake on the cot, he let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Hannah, oh thank God!" He rushed to her side, taking her hand in both of his. "When Doc Henderson sent word that you had been bit by a rattler, I thought. "I am all right, Papa," Hannah said, squeezing his hand. "Thanks to Mr. Wright here." Thomas turned to Lucas, and for a moment Hannah thought her father might actually cry. "You saved my daughter's life." Lucas stood, looking uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what needed doing, sir." "No," Thomas's voice was firm. "You did more than that. Doc Henderson told me what you did, how you rode all night to get her here. Most men would not have acted so quickly or so bravely." He pulled out his wallet. "Please let me pay you whatever you want." "I do not want your money, Mr. Morrison," Lucas said quietly. "Then what can I do?" "There must be something." Lucas glanced at Hannah, and their eyes met. Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them could quite name. "Just let me come by and check on her recovery, make sure she is healing properly." Thomas looked between them, and a knowing expression crossed his face. "You are welcome at our home anytime, Mr. Wright. Anytime at all." Over the next few weeks, Lucas took Thomas at his word. He came by the Morrison house nearly every day, usually in the evening after his work at the Henderson ranch was done. At first, he would just sit on the porch with Hannah, asking about her leg and making sure she was following Doc Henderson's orders. But gradually, their conversations grew longer and ranged further. Hannah learned that Lucas was originally from Missouri, that he had come west after his parents died of fever when he was 19. He had worked as a cowboy ever since, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying in one place too long. He was 26 now, and he admitted he was getting tired of the wandering life. "I want to have my own place someday," he told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. "Nothing fancy. Just enough land to run some cattle, maybe grow a little wheat, a house with a real wood floor and glass windows." "That sounds nice," Hannah said. She was sitting in a rocking chair with her injured leg propped up on a stool. The swelling had gone down considerably, and Doc Henderson said she was healing better than he had expected. "Where would you want this ranch?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I am starting to think maybe right here in Kansas would not be so bad. The land is good, and the people are decent." Hannah felt her cheeks warm, though she told herself not to read too much into his words. "What about family? Would you want a family on this ranch of yours?" "A man gets lonely without family," Lucas said. He was not looking at her, but she could see a muscle working in his jaw. "I would like a wife someday, children, a real home, not just a place to sleep between jobs." "Any girl would be lucky to be that wife," Hannah said softly. Now Lucas did turn to look at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "Would you think so?" Before Hannah could answer, her father opened the front door. "Hannah, it is getting chilly. You should come inside." The moment broke, and Lucas stood quickly. "I should get going anyway. Need to be up before dawn tomorrow." But he came back the next evening, and the evening after that. Hannah found herself watching for him as the sun started to sink low, her heart lifting when she saw his familiar figure riding down the street on his black horse. They talked about everything and nothing. Her love of books and his experiences on the range, her dreams of seeing new places and his contentment with the simple life, her close relationship with her father and his memories of his lost parents. One evening, about a month after the snake bite, Lucas arrived with something wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to Hannah with an almost shy expression. "I was in town today and saw this," he said. "Thought you might like it." Hannah unwrapped the package and found a book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. She looked up at Lucas in amazement. "How did you know?" "I have been wanting to read this for months, but the bookstore in El Dorado never has anything new." "I remembered you saying you liked adventure stories," Lucas said, a small smile playing at his lips. "The shopkeeper in Newton said this one is supposed to be exciting, something about a submarine and a giant squid." Hannah clutched the book to her chest, feeling tears prick at her eyes. It was not just the gift itself, though that was wonderful. It was the fact that he had remembered, that he had thought of her when he was in another town, that he had spent his hard-earned money on something to make her happy. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Lucas looked pleased but embarrassed. "It is just a book." "It is not just a book," Hannah said firmly. "It is thoughtful and perfect, and I will treasure it." They sat together as the stars came out, and Hannah read aloud from the first chapter. Lucas listened with his eyes closed, his face peaceful in the lamplight that spilled from the windows. When she finally closed the book, he opened his eyes and looked at her. "You have a beautiful voice," he said. "I could listen to you read forever." "Then I suppose I will have to read you the whole book," Hannah replied, her heart racing. "I would like that." As summer turned to fall, Hannah's ankle healed completely, though Doc Henderson said she would always have the scars from where Lucas had cut the wound. Hannah did not mind. Every time she saw those small white lines on her skin, she thought of the man who had saved her life, who had ridden through the night to get her to safety. She was falling in love with Lucas Wright. She knew it with a certainty that should have frightened her, but somehow did not. She loved the way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. She loved how gentle he was despite his rough exterior, how he always took his hat off when he came to the door, how he asked her father's permission before taking her for walks through town. She loved his quiet strength and his dry sense of humor, and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But she did not know if he felt the same way. Lucas was always respectful, always proper. He never tried to hold her hand or steal a kiss, never said anything that could not be said in front of her father. Sometimes, Hannah caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something intense and longing, but the moment always passed before she could be sure. It was Thomas who finally brought things to a head. One evening in late September, after Lucas had left for the night, he sat down across from Hannah at the kitchen table. "That boy is in love with you," he said without preamble. Hannah felt her face go hot. "Papa, you do not know that." "I am old, not blind," Thomas said with a snort. "The way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars, that is love, daughter, plain as day." "Even if he does care for me, he has not said anything," Hannah pointed out. "Maybe he is just being friendly." "He is being careful," Thomas corrected. "Lucas Wright is a good man, but he does not have much to offer. He makes cowboy wages, lives in a bunkhouse, does not own any property. He probably thinks he has no right to court you properly." "I do not care about any of that," Hannah said fiercely. "I do not care if he is rich or poor. He saved my life, Papa. He is kind and good, and I—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Thomas reached across the table and patted her hand. "I know, sweet girl. I have known for weeks now. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do? I cannot exactly propose to him." "No, but you can make your feelings known. Give him the encouragement he needs to speak up." Thomas smiled. "And for what it is worth, if Lucas Wright did ask for your hand, he would have my blessing. That boy proved his character the day he saved you. Everything since has only confirmed it." The next evening, Hannah decided to take her father's advice. When Lucas arrived, she suggested they take a walk down by the creek, the same creek she had been exploring the day of the snake bite. Lucas agreed, and they walked in comfortable silence until they reached a spot where cottonwood trees overhung the water. "This is nice," Lucas said, looking around. "Peaceful." "Lucas, can I ask you something?" Hannah said, her heart pounding. "Of course. Why do you keep coming to see me?" "It has been nearly 2 months since the snake bite. You do not need to check on my recovery anymore." Lucas was quiet for so long that Hannah thought she had made a terrible mistake. Then he turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath stop. "You really do not know?" he asked softly. "I want to hear you say it," Hannah whispered. Lucas took a step closer. They were standing so near now that Hannah could see the individual stubble hairs on his jaw, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that always clung to him. "I keep coming because I cannot stay away," Lucas said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because every minute I am not with you feels wasted. Because when I close my eyes at night, I see your face. Because I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you against that tree, so scared but trying to be brave." Hannah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I love you too," she said. "I have loved you for weeks now. I was just afraid you did not feel the same way." "How could I not?" Lucas reached up and cupped her face in his calloused hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "You are the smartest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever met. But Hannah, I have to be honest with you. I do not have much to offer. I have some savings, but not enough to buy land yet. I live in a bunkhouse with 5 other cowboys. I cannot give you the life you deserve." "You saved my life," Hannah said fiercely. "You risked your own health drawing out that venom. You rode all night to get me to the doctor. You come to see me every single day even though you must be exhausted from work. You bought me a book because you remembered I liked adventure stories. How can you say you have nothing to offer? You have already given me everything." "I want to marry you," Lucas said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know I should wait, should court you properly for at least a year, should save up more money. But I cannot stand the thought of another man seeing you and realizing how special you are. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build that ranch I told you about and fill it with our children. I want to grow old with you, Hannah Morrison. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Hannah breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Lucas let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was kissing her. His lips were warm and slightly chapped, and the kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent. Then Hannah wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the love and longing she had been holding inside, and Lucas pulled her closer, his arms strong and sure around her waist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I promise I will be a good husband," he said. "I will work hard and provide for you and never give you cause to regret this." "I could never regret loving you," Hannah said. "Not in a million years." They walked back to the Morrison house hand in hand, and Lucas formally asked Thomas for Hannah's hand in marriage. Thomas pretended to consider for a moment, then broke into a wide grin and shook Lucas's hand so hard the younger man winced. "About time," Thomas said. "I was starting to think I would have to lock you two in a room together until one of you said something." The wedding was held 6 weeks later, in early November of 1879. It was a simple affair at the small church in El Dorado, with most of the town in attendance. Hannah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper for 16 years since her mother's death. Lucas wore a new suit that he had saved up to buy, and when he saw Hannah walking down the aisle on her father's arm, his eyes filled with tears. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Hannah so sweetly that several of the ladies in attendance sighed out loud. The reception was held at the Morrison house, with neighbors bringing food and the Henderson ranch hands showing up to congratulate their friend. John Henderson, Lucas's boss, pulled the newlyweds aside at one point. "I have a proposition for you two," he said. "I have been thinking about retiring, spending more time with my grandchildren. How would you feel about managing the ranch for me? The pay would be better than what you are making now, Lucas, and there is a foreman's house that needs occupants. It has 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, even a parlor with a fireplace." Lucas and Hannah exchanged glances, hardly daring to believe their luck. "Are you serious?" Lucas asked. "Serious as a heart attack," John said. "You are the best hand I have got, Lucas, and I have seen how you handle responsibility. Plus, any man who rides all night to save a woman's life is the kind of man I want looking after my cattle." He winked at Hannah. "Consider it a wedding present." "We accept," Hannah said quickly, before Lucas could start worrying about whether he deserved it. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. You will not regret this." "I know I will not," John said warmly. The foreman's house was everything John had promised and more. It was a 2-story wood frame building painted white, with a wraparound porch and real glass windows that caught the morning sun. Inside, there was a parlor with a stone fireplace, a dining room with built-in cabinets, a kitchen with a proper stove, and upstairs, 3 good-sized bedrooms. Hannah stood in the middle of the parlor on their first day there, slowly turning in a circle to take it all in. "It is perfect," she whispered. Lucas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "It is ours," he said, sounding amazed. "Our first real home." They spent the next few weeks making the house their own. Hannah sewed curtains for the windows and bought rugs for the floors. Lucas built shelves for her growing collection of books and made sure the fireplace drew properly before winter set in. Thomas came by frequently, ostensibly to check on them but really just to enjoy seeing his daughter so happy. As December arrived, and the Kansas prairie turned brown and cold, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening after dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, his face blank. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming him. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Hannah asked, though she could already see the answer in his eyes. "Happy." Lucas swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing. "I am the luckiest man alive. I have the woman I love, a home, a good job, and now a baby on the way. Hannah, I never dreamed I could have all this." He set her down gently, suddenly worried. "Wait, should I not be spinning you around? Is it safe? What did Doc Henderson say?" Hannah laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "Doc Henderson said I am perfectly healthy and that you should stop worrying so much. He also said the baby should arrive sometime in early August." "August," Lucas repeated. He placed his hand over Hannah's stomach, which was still flat beneath her dress. "Our son or daughter? Are you hoping for one more than the other?" Hannah asked curiously. Lucas considered the question seriously. "A son would be nice, someone to teach about ranching and riding. But a daughter would be wonderful too, especially if she looks like you." He kissed Hannah softly. "As long as you and the baby are healthy, I do not care which it is." The winter passed slowly, with Lucas becoming increasingly protective as Hannah's belly grew. He would not let her lift anything heavy or walk too far. He insisted she sit down whenever she looked the slightest bit tired. Hannah found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she knew it came from a place of deep love. On a cold February evening, they sat together by the fireplace, Hannah knitting a tiny blanket while Lucas oiled his saddle. The wind howled outside, but inside their home was warm and safe. "Read to me," Lucas asked, as he often did in the evenings. Hannah smiled and set aside her knitting. She picked up the copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that Lucas had given her all those months ago. They had read it together already, but Lucas never seemed to tire of hearing her voice. But tonight, instead of opening the book, Hannah just looked at her husband. His profile was strong in the firelight, his hands steady as they worked. She thought about how much her life had changed in less than a year. She had gone from a lonely shopkeeper's daughter who dreamed of adventure to a married woman expecting her first child, living in a beautiful home with a man who loved her more than she had ever thought possible. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing her stare. "I am thinking about how that rattlesnake was the worst thing that ever happened to me," Hannah said. Lucas set down his saddle and came to sit beside her on the sofa. He took her hand, his thumb tracing over her knuckles. "I used to have nightmares about that day," he admitted. "About what would have happened if I had ridden a different direction, if I had not heard you call out, if I had been too late." "But you were not too late," Hannah said firmly. "You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just incredibly good luck. But however it happened, I am grateful every single day that you were the one who found me." "I am the grateful one," Lucas said. He leaned down and kissed her, slow and deep. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Hannah. A home, a family, a reason to put down roots. Before I met you, I was just drifting from job to job, place to place. I did not even realize how lonely I was until suddenly I was not lonely anymore." Hannah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "We saved each other," she whispered. They sat together by the fire until late into the night, talking about their hopes for their child, about improvements they wanted to make to the ranch, about all the years stretching ahead of them. Outside, the Kansas wind blew cold and harsh, but inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Hannah and Lucas had never felt warmer. Spring came, and with it new life. The prairie turned green, Wildflowers bloomed in riotous color, and calves were born in the fields. Hannah's belly grew round and full, and she began to waddle when she walked, which Lucas found adorable even though she complained about it. Thomas came by even more frequently now, excited about becoming a grandfather. He had sold the general store to a young couple from Missouri and was enjoying a semi-retirement, spending his days fishing and visiting with friends. He usually showed up for dinner at least 3 times a week, and Lucas never minded. He knew how much it meant to Hannah to have her father close, and Thomas had become like a father to him as well. One evening in June, as the 3 of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas turned to Lucas with a serious expression. "I want you to know how proud I am of you, son," he said. "Not many men would have done what you did for Hannah. And the way you have taken care of her since, the way you have built a life together, it is more than I could have hoped for." Lucas looked uncomfortable, as he always did when receiving compliments. "I am just doing what any husband should do." "No," Thomas said firmly. "You are doing what a good man does. There is a difference." He reached over and clasped Lucas's shoulder. "Your parents would have been proud of you too. I wish they could have lived to see the man you have become." Lucas had to look away, his jaw working with emotion. Hannah reached over and took his hand, squeezing gently. These moments, when Lucas let his guard down and showed his vulnerability, were precious to her. He had spent so many years alone, learning to be tough and self-sufficient. Learning to accept love and family again had been a journey for him. "Thank you, Thomas," Lucas finally said, his voice rough. "That means more than you know." Summer arrived with scorching heat, and Hannah grew increasingly uncomfortable. Her back ached, her feet swelled, and she could not find a comfortable position to sleep in. Lucas did everything he could to help, bringing her cool water, rubbing her back, even sleeping in a chair some nights so she could spread out across the whole bed. "I am a terrible wife," Hannah said one particularly hot July evening. "All I do is complain and waddle around like a duck." "You are carrying our child," Lucas said, kneeling in front of her and placing his hands on her belly. "You are doing the most important, most difficult job in the world, and you are still beautiful to me, Hannah, more beautiful than ever." As if in response to his voice, the baby kicked hard against Lucas's palm. His face lit up with wonder, the way it did every time he felt the baby move. "Strong," he said approvingly. "This one is going to be a fighter. This one is going to be the death of me if they do not arrive soon," Hannah groaned. Doc Henderson said it could be any day now. It turned out to be 3 more days. Hannah's labor started just before dawn on August 5th, with a pain so sharp it woke her from sleep. She shook Lucas awake, trying to stay calm even though her heart was racing with fear and excitement. "It is time," she said. Lucas was out of bed and pulling on his pants before she finished speaking. "I will get Doc Henderson. Will you be all right alone for a few minutes?" "Go," Hannah said, breathing through another contraction. "But hurry." Lucas rode faster than he ever had in his life, pounding on Doc Henderson's door so hard he nearly broke it. The doctor, used to emergencies, calmly grabbed his bag and followed Lucas back to the ranch. The labor lasted most of the day. Lucas sat downstairs in the parlor, pacing back and forth while Thomas tried unsuccessfully to calm him down. Every time they heard Hannah cry out, Lucas would start for the stairs, only to be pulled back by Thomas or one of the ranch hands who had shown up to offer support. "First babies take time," Thomas kept saying. "She is strong. She will be fine." But Lucas could not shake the fear that gripped his heart. Women died in childbirth. It happened all the time. The thought of losing Hannah, of raising their child alone, was more than he could bear. He had already lost everyone he loved once. He could not do it again. It was early evening when Doc Henderson finally appeared at the top of the stairs. Lucas was up them in seconds, his face white with anxiety. "How is she? Is Hannah all right?" "The baby," Doc Henderson smiled, something he did not do often. "They are both fine, tired but healthy." "You have a son, Lucas." Lucas felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. "A son," he repeated. "Can I see them?" "Go on up, but be gentle. Hannah worked very hard today." Lucas took the stairs slowly, his heart pounding. He opened the bedroom door to find Hannah propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat and dark circles under her eyes. But she was smiling, looking down at the tiny bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Lucas crossed the room on shaking legs and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Hannah shifted the baby so he could see, and Lucas looked down at the most perfect thing he had ever seen. His son had a shock of dark hair, a tiny button nose, and miniature fingers that were curled into fists. As Lucas watched, the baby yawned, showing pink gums. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. "He is absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Hannah asked. Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. Hannah carefully placed the baby in his arms, and Lucas looked down at his son with a sense of awe that bordered on religious. This tiny person was his and Hannah's, a new life they had created together. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. They had discussed names over the past months but had never quite settled on one. Now, holding his son, Lucas knew exactly what felt right. "James," he said. "James Morrison Wright, after your mother's father, if that is all right with you." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect. Papa will be so happy." As if summoned, there was a knock on the door and Thomas poked his head in. "Can an old man meet his grandson?" "Come in, Papa," Hannah said with a laugh. Thomas approached the bed slowly, his eyes locked on the baby in Lucas's arms. When he saw his grandson's face, he let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "He looks just like Hannah did when she was born," Thomas said wonderingly. "Same little nose, same serious expression. Oh, you two have done good. You have done so good." Lucas carefully transferred the baby to Thomas's arms, and the older man cradled his grandson with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before. He swayed gently, murmuring soft words to the baby. "James Morrison Wright," Thomas said, testing out the name. "A strong name for what will no doubt be a strong man." He looked up at Lucas and Hannah, his eyes wet with tears. "Thank you for this. Thank you for giving me family again. The first months with James were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure." The baby had a healthy set of lungs and was not shy about using them, especially at 3 in the morning. Lucas and Hannah took turns walking him, rocking him, trying everything they could think of to soothe him when he cried. But there were also moments of pure magic. The first time James smiled at Lucas, a real smile that lit up his whole face, Lucas felt something in his chest expand almost painfully. When James learned to laugh, a gurgling giggle that erupted whenever Lucas made funny faces, Hannah declared it the best sound in the world. Lucas proved to be a devoted father. He would come in from a long day of work and immediately ask to hold his son. He changed diapers without complaint, walked James around the house when he was fussy, and sang to him in a low, rumbling voice that always seemed to calm the baby down. One evening, Hannah woke to find Lucas's side of the bed empty. She got up and found him in James's room, sitting in the rocking chair with their son asleep against his chest. Lucas was just sitting there in the moonlight, looking down at James with an expression of such love and wonder that it made Hannah's throat tight. "You should be sleeping," she whispered from the doorway. Lucas looked up and smiled. "I know. I just wanted to hold him a little longer. He grows so fast, I do not want to miss a moment." Hannah came and sat on the arm of the rocking chair, leaning against her husband. "You are a wonderful father," she said softly. "I hope you know that." "I had good examples to learn from," Lucas said. "My parents loved me well, even if I only had them for a short time, and your father showed me what it means to put family first." He shifted James slightly in his arms. "I want to give him everything. A good home, a good education, opportunities I never had." "You are already giving him the most important thing," Hannah said. "Love. That is what he will remember when he is grown, not whether we were rich or poor, but that he was loved." As the months passed, and James grew from an infant into a chubby, active baby, the ranch prospered under Lucas's management. He worked closely with John Henderson to improve the herd, bringing in better breeding stock and implementing new techniques he had read about. The ranch hands respected him, and the cattle thrived under his care. Hannah found fulfillment in being a mother and a ranch wife, but she also made time for her own interests. She started a small library in El Dorado, organizing donations of books and holding reading hours for children. Lucas would sometimes come home to find their parlor full of neighbor children, all sitting in rapt attention while Hannah read them stories of adventure and far-off lands. "You are a natural teacher," Lucas observed one day after the children had left. "Have you ever thought about becoming one officially?" Hannah considered the idea. "Maybe someday when James is older. For now, I am happy doing this." She gestured around the parlor, which looked like a small hurricane had gone through it, "though I might need to buy more chairs." James's first birthday came in August of 1881, and they threw a party that seemed to include half the county. The ranch hands made a little wooden rocking horse for him. Thomas presented him with a set of building blocks he had carved himself, and John Henderson gave them a bond to put toward James's future education. As the guests milled around, eating cake and watching James smash his fist into a small birthday cake of his own, Lucas pulled Hannah aside. "I have been thinking," he said. "John wants to sell the ranch. He is getting too old to manage it, even with me doing most of the work. He offered to sell it to us at a fair price with generous terms." Hannah's eyes widened. "The whole ranch? Can we afford that?" "It would stretch us thin for a few years," Lucas admitted. "But I have been saving and we have been making good profits." "John said he would hold the loan himself so we would not have to deal with a bank. I think we could do it, Hannah. We could own all this." He gestured at the land around them. "It could be ours to pass on to James someday." "Then we should do it," Hannah said without hesitation. "This is our home. We should make it official." The deal was finalized by the end of the year. Lucas and Hannah became the proud owners of 3,000 acres of prime Kansas rangeland, 200 head of cattle, and all the buildings and equipment of what was now called the Wright Ranch. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Lucas worked harder than ever, determined to make the ranch succeed. He hired a few more hands, invested in better horses, and started experimenting with growing wheat in addition to raising cattle. Hannah handled the books, tracking expenses and income with a careful eye. Together, they made a formidable team. As James grew into a curious toddler, he became fascinated with everything his father did. He would follow Lucas around the ranch, his little legs pumping to keep up, chattering away in the half-formed words of a 2-year-old. Lucas was endlessly patient with him, explaining what he was doing and letting James help whenever possible. "He is going to be a rancher through and through," Hannah said one day, watching Lucas show James how to feed a calf with a bottle. "If that is what he wants," Lucas said. "But we will make sure he has choices. Education, opportunities. He can be whatever he wants to be." In the spring of 1883, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. James was now 3 1/2, energetic and bright, and the light of their lives. The thought of adding another child to their family filled Hannah with both excitement and trepidation. "What if I cannot love another baby as much as I love James?" she confided to Lucas one night. "What if there is not enough love to go around?" Lucas wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "The heart does not divide, Hannah, it multiplies. I learned that from you and James. I thought I knew what love was before he was born, but he taught me I could love even more than I knew. It will be the same with this baby." Lucas was right. When Hannah gave birth to a daughter in December of 1883, she fell in love all over again. They named her Elizabeth Grace, and she was born with a full head of blonde hair and her father's blue eyes. James was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit next to Hannah while she nursed, asking endless questions about what the baby was doing and when she would be big enough to play with him. Lucas had to stop him from bringing Elizabeth his favorite toys, explaining that babies could not play with blocks yet. "When she is bigger," James would say seriously, patting his sister's tiny hand. "When she is bigger, we will play together." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas continued to build the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the county. Hannah balanced motherhood with her community work, and James and Elizabeth grew like weeds. Thomas was a constant presence, doting on his grandchildren and helping out wherever he was needed. On a warm summer evening in 1885, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper. James, now 5, was teaching Elizabeth, 18 months old, how to stack blocks. Thomas sat in his favorite rocking chair, smoking his pipe and watching his grandchildren with a contented smile. Hannah and Lucas sat together on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. "Do you ever think about that day?" Hannah asked softly, knowing Lucas would understand which day she meant. "All the time," Lucas admitted. "I think about how easily things could have gone differently. If I had been riding 5 minutes earlier or later, if I had not heard you call out, if I had panicked and done the wrong thing." He tightened his arm around her. "I thank God for every choice that led me to that exact spot at that exact moment." "I used to dream about adventure," Hannah said, watching her children play. "About traveling to far-off places and seeing exciting things. But I learned that real adventure is not about where you go. It is about who you are with and what you build together." "Do you ever regret not seeing those places you wanted to visit?" Lucas asked. "San Francisco and the ocean." Hannah lifted her head and looked at him. "Lucas Wright, I have had more adventure in the past 6 years than most people have in a lifetime. I fell in love with a cowboy who saved my life. I helped build a ranch from the ground up. I brought 2 beautiful children into the world. How could I regret any of that?" Lucas smiled and kissed her, slow and sweet. After all these years, kissing Hannah still made his heart race. "I love you," he said simply. "More than I did yesterday, less than I will tomorrow." "That is very poetic for a cowboy," Hannah teased. "I learned from the best," Lucas replied, gesturing to the pile of books visible through the window. Hannah still read to him most evenings, and over the years, he had picked up a love of literature that rivaled her own. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Lucas looked around at his family. His son, so serious and smart. His daughter, all giggles and mischief. His father-in-law, who had become the father he lost too young. And his wife, the woman who had changed his entire life with a single snake bite. He thought about the younger version of himself, the lonely cowboy who had been drifting from place to place with no real purpose. He barely recognized that man anymore. Lucas had found his purpose, had found his home, had found everything he never knew he needed. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. James started school in El Dorado, riding into town each day on his pony and coming home full of stories about what he had learned. Elizabeth grew from a toddler into a little girl with her mother's love of books and her father's stubborn determination. In 1888, when James was 8 and Elizabeth was 4, Hannah gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Thomas after his grandfather. Old Thomas cried when they told him, touched beyond words that they had chosen to honor him. "You did not have to do that," he said, wiping at his eyes. "Yes, we did," Lucas said firmly. "You took me into your family when I had no one. You gave me a home and treated me like a son. Naming our boy after you is the least we can do." Lucas and Hannah now had 3 children, a thriving ranch, and a place in the community. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and economic downturns. Through it all, they had leaned on each other and come through stronger. One challenge came in the form of a wealthy rancher from Texas who wanted to buy them out. Marcus Brennan offered a substantial sum, enough that they could retire comfortably. But Lucas and Hannah did not even have to discuss it before turning him down. "This land is not for sale," Lucas told Brennan firmly. "This is our home, and we are building something here to pass on to our children." Brennan was not used to being refused. He tried various tactics over the next few months, increasing his offer, making veiled threats, trying to poach Lucas's ranch hands with promises of higher wages. But Lucas stood firm, and the community rallied around him. Brennan eventually gave up and moved on to easier targets. The incident reminded Lucas of how much he had to lose, how precious everything he had built was. That night, he held Hannah close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I will never let anyone take this away from us," he promised. "Everything we have, everything we are, I will protect it with my life." "I know you will," Hannah said. "You have been protecting me from the very first day we met." By 1890, the Wright Ranch was known throughout Kansas as one of the best-run operations in the state. Lucas had earned a reputation for fair dealing and innovative practices, and ranch owners from other counties would sometimes come to ask his advice. James, now 10 years old, was already an accomplished rider and had begun to take on real responsibilities around the ranch. He had inherited his father's quiet competence and his mother's quick mind. Lucas would watch his son work and feel a swell of pride that never quite faded. Elizabeth, at 6, showed signs of becoming a beauty like her mother. She was fearless, always climbing trees and wanting to keep up with her older brother. She had also inherited Hannah's love of reading and could often be found curled up with a book in some corner of the house. Young Thomas, at 2, was pure energy and mischief. He kept Hannah running after him all day, getting into everything and asking endless questions. Lucas loved coming home to the chaos his youngest son created, the noise and life that filled their house. Old Thomas was slowing down now, his hair completely white and his movements stiff with age. But his mind was sharp as ever, and he spent hours telling his grandchildren stories about their mother growing up, about the early days of El Dorado, about a world that was rapidly changing around them. On a crisp October evening in 1891, Thomas did not show up for his usual dinner visit. When Lucas rode over to check on him, he found the old man sitting peacefully in his favorite chair by the window, a smile on his face. He had died quietly, without pain or struggle, looking out at the sunset. Hannah took her father's death hard. For weeks afterward, she would suddenly start crying at odd moments, overwhelmed by grief. Lucas held her through it, let her talk about her father and her memories, understood that this was a pain that would take time to heal. "He had a good life," Lucas reminded her gently. "He saw you happily married, got to know his grandchildren, lived long enough to see everything he had hoped for you come true." "I know," Hannah said, wiping at her eyes. "I just miss him so much. He was my last connection to my mother, to my childhood. Now that he is gone, I am the older generation. It feels strange." They buried Thomas in the El Dorado cemetery next to his wife, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. The preacher spoke about a life well lived, about a man who had been a pillar of the community. James, Elizabeth, and young Thomas stood quietly by their parents, not fully understanding death, but knowing something important had happened. After the funeral, Lucas found James sitting alone on the porch, looking thoughtful. "What are you thinking about, son?" Lucas asked, sitting down beside him. "I was thinking about Grandpa Thomas," James said, "and about how he is gone now, but we will remember him. We will tell stories about him, and that way he will kind of still be here." Lucas felt his chest tighten with emotion. "That is exactly right. As long as we remember the people we love, they never really leave us." "Will you tell me about your parents?" James asked. "You do not talk about them very much." Lucas was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain to his 10-year-old son what he barely understood himself. "My parents died when I was young, not much older than you are now. I was angry for a long time, felt like the world had been unfair to take them from me. But then, I met your mother, and I learned that life has a way of leading us where we are supposed to be. If my parents had not died, I might never have come to Kansas. I never would have been riding through that particular piece of land on that particular day. I never would have met your mother or had you and your sisters and brother. So something good came from something bad," James said slowly. "Yes, that does not make the bad thing okay or fair, but it helps to know that even painful things can lead to joy eventually." Lucas put his arm around his son's shoulders. "Your mother and I will tell you all about your other grandparents someday. They would have loved you very much." The years continued their steady march. The children grew and learned and became their own people. James developed into a serious, responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Elizabeth proved to be a natural artist, filling sketchbooks with drawings of horses and landscapes. Young Thomas showed musical talent, picking up any instrument he could find and coaxing music from it. In 1895, when James was 15, he asked Lucas if he could start working as a real ranch hand, not just doing chores but taking on actual responsibility. Lucas agreed, and father and son began working side by side every day. The other ranch hands treated James as one of them, teaching him everything they knew and occasionally playing pranks on him the way they did with any greenhorn. One evening that summer, Lucas came home to find Hannah sitting on the porch with a strange expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, always alert to any problem. "Nothing is wrong," Hannah said slowly. "It is just that Elizabeth came to me today to talk about boys." "Boys, Lucas, our daughter is interested in boys." Lucas felt something lurch in his chest. "She is only 12. Almost 13, Hannah corrected. "And she is not interested in anyone specifically, at least not yet, but it made me realize how fast they are growing up. James will be a man soon. Elizabeth is becoming a young woman. Even Thomas is not a baby anymore." She looked up at her husband with tears in her eyes. "Where did the time go?" Lucas sat down beside her and pulled her close. "It went into building this," he said, gesturing at the ranch, the house, the land stretching out around them. "Into creating a family and a life. That is where the time went, Hannah, and I would not trade a single moment of it." In 1898, Lucas turned 41 and Hannah 37. They had been married for 19 years, and Lucas still looked at his wife the way he had when they first met. The love between them had only deepened with time, weathered by challenges and enriched by shared experiences. James was 18 now, a full-grown man who stood as tall as his father and could out-rope most of the ranch hands. He had started courting a girl from town, the schoolteacher's daughter, and Lucas and Hannah watched with bittersweet feelings as their oldest child navigated first love. "Do you remember when we were like that?" Hannah asked, watching James help his sweetheart down from her wagon. "I remember thinking I would die if you did not love me back," Lucas said. "I remember feeling like my heart was going to pound right out of my chest every time I saw you." Hannah smiled and took his hand. "I felt the same way. I still do sometimes." "Just sometimes," Lucas teased. "Fine, often," Hannah admitted. "You still make my heart race, Lucas Wright, even after all these years." Elizabeth, at 15, had started helping her mother with the library in town. She was popular with the other young people in El Dorado, always surrounded by friends and admirers. Lucas tried not to think about how soon young men would start calling on her. Thomas, at 10, was the most social of their children. He had friends scattered across the county and could talk to anyone about anything. He was also turning into quite the horseman, with a natural seat and gentle hands that made even the most spirited mounts respond to him. In the fall of 1899, James announced his engagement to Mary Ellen Walsh, the schoolteacher's daughter. The wedding was planned for the following spring, and Hannah threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm. "Our son is getting married," she kept saying, half in wonder, half in disbelief. "How is that possible? He was just a baby." Lucas understood the feeling. It seemed like yesterday that James had been learning to walk, following Lucas around the ranch on chubby toddler legs. Now he was a man about to start his own family. It made Lucas feel both proud and ancient at the same time. The wedding in April of 1900 was a grand affair, with guests coming from all over Kansas to celebrate. James and Mary Ellen spoke their vows in the same church where Lucas and Hannah had married 21 years earlier. As Lucas watched his son kiss his bride, he felt Hannah's hand slip into his and squeeze tight. "We did good," she whispered. "We did very good," Lucas agreed. James and Mary Ellen moved into a small house on the ranch property that Lucas and some of the hands had built over the winter. It was close enough that James could continue working the ranch while still having his own space with his new wife. 9 months later, in January of 1901, Hannah and Lucas became grandparents for the first time. James and Mary Ellen had a daughter they named Catherine, and Lucas discovered that being a grandfather was somehow even more wonderful than being a father. He could love this child completely without the weight of responsibility he had felt with his own children, could spoil her and play with her, and then hand her back when she needed changing. "You are hopeless," Hannah told him, watching Lucas make silly faces to get baby Catherine to smile. "I am a grandfather," Lucas said, as if that explained everything. And really, it did. The new century brought changes to Kansas and to the Wright Ranch. Automobiles started appearing in El Dorado, though Lucas stubbornly stuck with horses. Telephone lines were being strung, though the ranch was too far out to connect yet. The world was modernizing, moving faster, and sometimes Lucas felt like he was struggling to keep up. But the core of his life remained constant. Hannah, their children, the land, and the work. These things did not change, even as the world around them transformed. Elizabeth married in 1903 at the age of 20 to a teacher from Wichita named Robert Henderson. No relation to John Henderson, who had passed away in 1897. It was harder for Lucas to let his daughter go than it had been with James, and he had to fight back tears as he walked her down the aisle. "She will be happy," Hannah told him that night as they lay in bed. "Robert is a good man and he loves her very much." "I know," Lucas said. I just remember when she was tiny, when I could protect her from everything. Now she is going off to make her own life, and I cannot shield her anymore." "That is what we raised them to do," Hannah reminded him gently. "To grow up and become independent. We did not want them to need us forever." "My head knows that," Lucas said. "My heart is taking a little longer to catch up." Thomas, now 15, showed no interest in settling down anytime soon. He was still exploring different interests, still figuring out who he wanted to be. Lucas let him, remembering his own youth and the importance of finding his own path. By 1905, Lucas was 48 and Hannah 44. They were grandparents 3 times over, with James and Mary Ellen having added a son named Lucas Jr., and Elizabeth and Robert having a daughter named Grace. Their children were grown and launched into the world. The ranch was running smoothly, almost able to function without Lucas's constant attention. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before, Hannah turned to Lucas with a smile. "We should take a trip," she announced. Lucas looked at her in surprise. "A trip? Where?" "San Francisco," Hannah said. "I want to see the ocean, Lucas. I have wanted to since I was a girl. We are not too old yet. James can manage the ranch for a few weeks. Let us have an adventure." Lucas started to think of all the reasons why they could not, why they should not. Then he stopped himself. Why not? They had worked hard for nearly 30 years. Their children were grown. The ranch was prosperous. If not now, when? "All right," he said, watching Hannah's face light up. "Let us go to San Francisco." They took the train west in the summer of 1905, leaving Kansas for the first time in decades. The journey itself was an adventure, watching the landscape change from prairie to mountains to desert to coastal hills. Hannah pressed her face to the window like a child, not wanting to miss anything. San Francisco was everything Hannah had dreamed and more. They stayed in a hotel with electric lights and indoor plumbing, walked along streets crowded with people from every corner of the world, and finally, on their 3rd day there, Lucas took Hannah to the beach. She stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the beauty and vastness of it. The waves crashed against the shore in an endless rhythm, and the salt air filled her lungs. Lucas stood beside her, holding her hand, and felt his own throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you," Hannah said, turning to him. "Thank you for making my dream come true." "You made all my dreams come true first," Lucas said. "This is the least I could do." They spent 2 weeks in California, seeing the sights and reveling in their freedom. But as wonderful as it was, they were both eager to get home by the end. Kansas called to them, and so did their family. When they returned to the ranch, they were greeted by all 3 of their children and all the grandchildren. Young Catherine, now 4 years old, threw herself into Lucas's arms with a shriek of joy. "I missed you, Grandpa," she declared. "I missed you too, little one," Lucas said, hugging her tight. He looked around at his family, at the ranch buildings, at the familiar Kansas landscape, and felt a sense of contentment so profound it was almost painful. It is good to be home. The years rolled on with their usual mix of joy and sorrow. They lost friends to old age and illness. They celebrated births and weddings. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin to develop their own dreams and personalities. The ranch continued to thrive under the combined management of Lucas and James, father and son working as a seamless team. In 1910, Thomas announced he was leaving Kansas to study music in Chicago. Lucas struggled with this, unable to understand why his son would want to leave the ranch. "Not everyone is called to this life, Lucas," Hannah told him gently. "Thomas has a gift and he needs to develop it. We should be proud that he is pursuing his passion." "I am proud," Lucas insisted. "I just do not understand it." You did not understand my love of books at first either, Hannah pointed out. But you learned. You will learn to understand this too. She was right, as she usually was. Over time, Lucas came to appreciate his son's musical talent and the courage it took to leave home and chase a dream. Thomas wrote regularly from Chicago, his letters full of excitement about his studies and the music scene there. Elizabeth and Robert moved back to El Dorado in 1912, with Robert taking a position as principal at the local school. Lucas was thrilled to have his daughter close again, to see his granddaughter Grace regularly. Elizabeth continued her artwork, her paintings starting to gain recognition beyond El Dorado. James and Mary Ellen added 2 more children to their family, giving Lucas and Hannah 5 grandchildren in total. The ranch house was always full of noise and life, with children running through it at all hours. Lucas loved it, loved the chaos and the laughter and the constant activity. On a quiet evening in the spring of 1915, Lucas and Hannah sat together on the porch swing, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Lucas was 60 now, his dark hair liberally streaked with gray. Hannah was 54, still beautiful in his eyes, though she insisted the lines around her eyes and mouth made her look old. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if that rattlesnake had not bitten me?" Hannah asked. It was not the first time she had asked the question, and probably would not be the last. It was something they both returned to occasionally, marveling at the randomness of fate. "I would have been lost," Lucas said simply. "I did not know it at the time, but I was just drifting, waiting for something to give my life meaning. You gave me that meaning, Hannah. You and our children and this ranch. Everything good in my life flows from that one moment when I heard you call for help. I used to think the snake bite was the worst thing that ever happened to me," Hannah said, "but it brought me you. It brought me this life, so maybe it was actually the best thing." "It was the best thing for me," Lucas said. "No question about that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, over the life they had built together from that single moment of crisis and courage. The rattlesnake had been just doing what rattlesnakes do, but it had set in motion a chain of events that had shaped 2 lives, created a family, built a legacy. As the years continued to pass, Lucas began to slow down. His back ached in the mornings, and he could not work the long hours he once had. James gently took over more and more of the daily operations of the ranch, and Lucas found himself in the role of advisor rather than primary manager. He did not mind as much as he thought he would. It gave him more time with Hannah, more time with the grandchildren, more time to simply enjoy the life he had created. They still read together in the evenings, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still held hands when they walked. In 1918, the world was torn apart by war and pandemic. The Great War raged in Europe, and the Spanish flu swept across America, killing thousands. El Dorado was not spared. They lost friends and neighbors, watched helplessly as the disease cut through the community, but the Wright family was lucky. They all survived, though it was a near thing when Mary Ellen fell ill. James barely left her side for 2 weeks, and when she finally recovered, he clung to her with a desperation Lucas recognized. It was the same fear Lucas had felt when Hannah had been bitten by that rattlesnake so many years ago, the terror of losing the person who mattered most. The war ended, the pandemic eventually burned out, and life slowly returned to normal. Thomas came home from Chicago for a visit in 1920, bringing with him a wife named Sarah whom he had met at a concert. She was a pianist, warm and funny, and Lucas liked her immediately. "You did good, son," he told Thomas privately. "She is a fine woman." "I learned from the best," Thomas said, gesturing toward where Hannah and Sarah were laughing together over something. You and Mama showed all of us what a good marriage looks like." In 1925, Lucas and Hannah celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary. James and Mary Ellen hosted a party at their house, with all the children and grandchildren and half the county in attendance. There were speeches and toasts, and a cake that was almost too beautiful to cut. Lucas stood up to say a few words, and the room fell silent. He was 70 now, his face weathered and lined, his movements slower than they had once been. But his eyes were still that striking blue, and his voice was still strong. 46 years ago, I married the love of my life," he began. But the truth is, our story started a few months before that, on a day that began as one of the worst of Hannah's life and ended as one of the best of mine. He looked at his wife, at the woman who had been his partner and his love for nearly half a century. "A rattlesnake bit her 12 miles from help. I cut the wound and rode all night to save her. But what I did not know then was that she had already saved me. She just did not know it yet." Hannah was crying now, as were several of the guests. Lucas held out his hand to her, and she came to stand beside him. "We have built a good life together," Lucas continued. "Raised fine children, created a home, made our mark on this land. But the thing I am most proud of is that, after 46 years, I love this woman more than I did on our wedding day. Every year, every day, my love grows. That is the real miracle." He turned to Hannah and cupped her face in his hands, the same way he had that day by the creek when he had first told her he loved her. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you for saying yes, for building this life with me, for being my partner in everything. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Wright." Then he kissed her, sweet and gentle, while their family applauded and cheered. When they broke apart, Hannah was laughing through her tears. "You old romantic," she said. "After all these years, you can still make me cry." "That is my job," Lucas replied. "Making you cry happy tears, making you laugh, making sure you know every single day how much you are loved." The party went on late into the night, but eventually, everyone went home and Lucas and Hannah returned to their ranch house. They sat together on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the cool evening air. "It has been a good life," Hannah said quietly. "The best life," Lucas agreed. "And it is not over yet. We still have time, still have more memories to make," and they did. They welcomed more great-grandchildren into the family, watched as James's son Lucas Jr. took over more responsibility for the ranch, saw Elizabeth's artwork featured in a gallery in Kansas City. Thomas and Sarah visited regularly from Chicago, usually staying for weeks at a time. The years were kind to them, all things considered. They had their health longer than most, stayed active and engaged with their family and community. But eventually, age caught up with them as it does with everyone. In the spring of 1930, Lucas suffered a heart attack. It was not severe, but it was a warning. Doc Henderson, the original Doc's grandson who had taken over the practice, told them that Lucas needed to take it easy, avoid stress, rest more. Lucas did his best to follow orders, but it was hard. He had spent his entire adult life working, building, moving. Sitting still felt wrong. But Hannah insisted, and Lucas had never been able to refuse her anything. They spent a lot of time on the porch that summer, watching the world go by. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren came to visit constantly, keeping them company and helping with anything that needed doing. Lucas found he enjoyed this slower pace more than he expected, enjoyed having nothing to do but hold Hannah's hand and remember all the years they had shared. On a warm August evening, almost exactly 51 years after the day they had met, Lucas and Hannah sat together watching the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, the same colors it had been on countless evenings before. "Do you remember the first sunset we watched together?" Hannah asked. "The day you proposed." "I remember every sunset we have watched together," Lucas said. "But yes, I especially remember that one. I was so nervous I thought I might be sick. I had this whole speech planned out, but the moment I looked at you, everything I wanted to say just flew out of my head." "You did fine," Hannah said with a smile. "You asked me to marry you and I said yes. That is all that mattered." "Best decision I ever made," Lucas said. "Well, second best. The first best was cutting that wound and getting you to the doctor. Everything else good came from that." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and content. Then Lucas turned to Hannah, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I love you," he said, putting all the emotion of 5 decades into those 3 words. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. You know that, right?" "I know," Hannah whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "And I love you the same way." "Forever, Lucas. Always." Lucas smiled, that same smile that had made her heart race when she was 23 years old. Then he closed his eyes, still holding her hand, and slipped away as peacefully as a man could hope for. Hannah sat with him for a long time, holding his hand even after it grew cold, watching the stars come out one by one over the Kansas prairie they had both loved so much. She did not cry, not yet. There would be time for tears later. For now, she just wanted to sit with her husband one last time, to remember all they had been to each other. When James found them hours later, he understood immediately. He gently helped his mother inside, called his siblings, made the arrangements that needed making. But he also understood when Hannah insisted on one thing. "I want to be buried next to him," she said. "And I want our graves to have a special marker, something that tells our story." Hannah lived for 3 more years after Lucas's death. They were good years, filled with family and love, though she missed her husband every single day. She continued to read, to paint, to spend time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had saved her life, and then made that life worth living. She passed peacefully in her sleep on a cold January night in 1933, exactly 1 month before what would have been her 72nd birthday. Her children found her in the morning, looking peaceful, a small smile on her face. On her nightstand was the copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that Lucas had given her 54 years earlier, bookmarked at her favorite passage. They buried Hannah next to Lucas in the El Dorado Cemetery, just as she had requested. The marker they placed over both graves was made of Kansas limestone, carved with care and love. It read, Lucas Wright, 1865–1930, and Hannah Morrison Wright, 1861–1933. A rattlesnake bit her 12 miles from help. He cut the wound and rode all night to save her. She saved him right back. Together they built a life, a family, and a love that will endure forever. Their children stood at the graveside, along with their families and what seemed like half of Kansas. James spoke at the service, his voice strong despite his grief. "My parents taught us many things," he said. "They taught us the value of hard work and the importance of family. They taught us to be honest and fair in all our dealings. But most importantly, they taught us about love. Real, deep, lasting love. The kind of love that survives hardship and grows stronger with time. The kind of love that transforms 2 people into something greater than they could ever be alone." He paused, looking down at the graves. "My father once told me that meeting my mother was the best thing that ever happened to him, but it was not just good fortune that brought them together. It was courage. My father had the courage to act when someone needed help, to do what was necessary even though it was dangerous and unpleasant. My mother had the courage to trust him, to let him save her, and then to build a life with him even though he had nothing to offer but himself. That courage, that willingness to take a chance on each other, gave all of us the life we have lived. Elizabeth spoke next, reading a passage from one of her mother's favorite books. Then Thomas played a song he had composed for his parents, a melody that was somehow both sad and hopeful, a perfect tribute to a love that had endured for more than half a century. As the service ended and people began to drift away, James stayed behind with his siblings. They stood together, looking at the graves of their parents, and Lucas Jr., who went by Luke, appeared beside them with his own children. "Tell us about them," Luke said. "About Grandpa and Grandma, the real story, not just the legend." James smiled. "The truth is, the legend is real. Everything people say about them is true. My father did save my mother's life, did ride all night to get her to safety. My mother did fall in love with a cowboy who had nothing but courage and determination. Together they built the Wright Ranch into what it is today. They raised 3 children and lived to see their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They loved each other every single day for over 50 years. But what made them special?" asked Catherine, James's oldest daughter, now a grown woman with children of her own. "What made them special," Elizabeth said thoughtfully, "was that they understood what really matters. Not money or status or possessions, but love and family and building something that lasts. They knew that the best things in life are the people you share it with. They also taught us that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes," Thomas added. "That snakebite was a terrible thing. Mama could have died. But it brought them together, set everything else in motion. They never forgot that, never took their blessings for granted." The family stood together for a while longer, 3 generations connected by the love story of Lucas and Hannah Wright. Then they slowly made their way back to their cars and homes, carrying with them the legacy of 2 people who had proven that true love was not just the stuff of fairy tales, but something real and tangible and worth fighting for. The Wright Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down from father to son to grandson. The house where Lucas and Hannah had raised their family still stood, lovingly maintained and full of memories. And in El Dorado, people still told the story of the cowboy and the rattlesnake, of love born from crisis and courage, of 2 lives forever intertwined by fate and choice. Because in the end, that is what Lucas and Hannah's story was about. The choice to love, the choice to be brave, the choice to build something beautiful out of something terrifying. It was about a man who acted without hesitation when someone needed help, and a woman who recognized the value of that man beneath the rough exterior. It was about 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment, and then spent a lifetime grateful for that perfect timing. The rattlesnake had been just a snake, doing what snakes do. But the bite brought together 2 souls who were meant to find each other. And from that single moment, that one instant of pain and fear and desperate action, came a love story that lasted a lifetime and inspired generations. It was a reminder that sometimes our greatest blessings come from our darkest moments, if only we have the courage to reach for them. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Lucas and Hannah were together again, holding hands and watching the sunset, their love finally and forever free from the constraints of mortality. The cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him right back, bound together for all eternity by a love that had been forged in crisis and tempered by time into something unbreakable. Their story ended, as all stories must. But the love they shared, the family they created, and the legacy they left behind would continue on. Proof that even in the harsh and unforgiving world of the Old West, true love could not only survive but flourish. All it took was a moment of courage, a willingness to act, and two hearts brave enough to take a chance on each other. The end of their lives was not the end of their story. That would continue to be told in the lives of their descendants, in the ranch that still bore their name, in the memories of those who had known them. Lucas and Hannah Wright had lived and loved and built something that would last long after they were gone. And in doing so, they had proven what they had believed all along. That love, real love, is the most powerful force in the world, capable of transforming everything it touches. From a rattlesnake bite in the Kansas prairie to a love that spanned 51 years, from a desperate midnight ride to a family that continued to grow and thrive generations later, Lucas and Hannah's story was complete. It was a story of courage and kindness, of two people who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and made the most of every moment they were given. It was a story that proved that heroes were not just found in legends and tall tales, but in everyday people who made the choice to act, to love, and to build something meaningful with the time they had. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. A life well lived, a love well tended, and a family that would carry their memory forward into the future, keeping their story alive for as long as stories were told.